Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Well, hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today because I've got a special guest joining me behind the mic, and we're going to be diving into the legal world, more specifically about the 4 most common areas dentists need help with. Like most ways we all endeavor to grow our businesses, legal is never a DIY, and that's a good way to waste a lot of your hard-earned money, especially when an attorney then has to manage the risk and unwind the damage resulting from things like improperly handled situations or drafted agreements, contracts, and so forth. And unless you're tuning in with us for the first time today, you know that we are big advocates for bringing in the experts to help carry out strategy, growth plans, and the like, because although yes, it's an expense, I can all but promise you that the ROI of utilizing experts to scale will protect the health of your business, and it'll likely exceed your expectations. So naturally, as a former paralegal, I'm excited that I get to chat with today's guest and geek out a little on this topic. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Sara Stock, founder and CEO of Stock Legal. And for those of you who don't yet know Sara, Sara owns her own firm, 16 Lawyers, and earned her MBA in addition to a law degree. And she's got a great journey that she's going to share with us today and plenty of insights. So Sara, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate you having me. And I was reflecting as you were walking through the introduction, that DIY is so terrifying.
It
And
is.
when clients come to us with DIY or, they've just kind of like glommed some legal things together, we call it a rat's nest of legal issues that we have to
Oh.
unwind. And our experience tells us it costs about 3 times the amount to fix it that it would cost to just do it right the first time.
Oh,
So I
wow.
love that you brought that up.
I saw your face when I said it. It was like, it was an instant cringe. So
Yeah,
3 times, I'm sorry.
uh-huh,
I don't want to
I
spend,
know.
I mean, I'm happy to pay for all kinds of services that'll help me grow. And I know our listeners do too, but I'm not doing anything myself that is going to even cost me 2 times or 1.5.
Right. Well, and it is, as a lawyer, it is my least favorite work to do because clients feel like it brings no value. They've already paid for it once or done it once or what have you, and you're
Yeah.
coming in behind and it's all cleanup. So it's not really adding immediate value to what they're doing. Whereas when we get involved in the beginning and we can be proactive and we can be a partner to the entrepreneur that we're helping to build or scale their business, there is so much value that we bring. I mean, we get so excited to get to be that person that partners with them. I mean, that
Yes.
just feels so much better for everyone. And it's just a better use of their capital, the client's capital.
Yes. Well, and like we always say on this podcast, if you build it right from location one, or maybe that's a small group, it's going to go so much more smoothly if you just do it right from the outset. But I want to ask you,
Yeah.
when you have a situation where you've got to unwind that rat's nest, is there sometimes a little embarrassment that goes with it and you uncover things that you didn't expect? Because what I want our listeners to know here is that that shouldn't stop you from unwinding
Yeah.
way. And sometimes I think when you've tried to piecemeal something together, or cobble it together, that there might be a little bit of hesitation.
Yeah, Jeannie, I love that you brought that up because I feel like I say at least 5 times a week to an entrepreneur, you're not alone, right? This
Right.
happens. This is, this is what people do, or, you're rubbing 2 nickels together to try to figure it out in the beginning. And we all just do the best that we can. So, there is no shame, there is no embarrassment. There is just, you entrepreneur are at a point in time in your business journey where you have the ability to make it right. And better late than never. Let's get in, let's figure it out. We're going to be your partner and really digging in, understanding what you've got. in fact, like it's a great way for existing businesses to transition over to Stock Legal very regularly. After doing a complimentary 30-minute call or Zoom with a potential client, we say, send us all your documents. Send us your organizational documents, send us your contracts, send us your employment agreements, send us your services agreements. Let us take a look at what your legal foundation looks like. And because we're so intent on transparency and price, we always say we'll give you a really strong estimate of what that will cost. And then let us put together an email outlining issues, question, concerns, and recommendations so that we can really just like, let's all wrap our arms around the foundation that you have. And then let's figure out how to go from there. So, I love that you bring that up.
Well, that's a really smart strategy, and I think people really appreciate transparency. So, why don't we start with talking about your journey? Because you've touched on a couple of things here, but I want
I
our
love that we just jumped in. We're like, let's
we
let's
did.
talk about all the good stuff. And then you're like, wait, hold on. Who are
Wait,
you?
let's back up a little because we might have some listeners who aren't familiar, and I want them to get to know who you are before we jump into those areas that we talked about before that Dennis asked about. So tell our audience a little bit about you and how you landed where you are today, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. The 30,000 foot is that I started out at a large regional law firm. My background was a general corporate securities work, commercial real estate, and banking, which are the core practice areas for any corporate lawyer. And so as I was making my way through the ranks at that firm, I became equity partner. I had an amazing experience working with some phenomenal lawyers doing very cool things for clients that included dentists and doctors, as well as publicly traded corporations. I came to a point in my career where I really had to sit down and ask myself, what do I want to spend the rest of my life doing? And because I grew up in a family business, my family still runs a trucking company over in Lebanon, Illinois. And that's why I went to law school. I made the gut wrenching decision to transition out of a big firm environment, start my own practice, because really I felt like my purpose was working with clients that looked more like my family, that were pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into building their business. And so that was what was the impetus for making the transition out 11 years ago and starting my own practice. And like I'd mentioned, I'd always worked with some dentists, some doctors. Once I started my own practice, I worked with dentists and doctors, but it really wasn't until 2017 where I had the opportunity to work with your fearless leader, DeWalker, on
Yes.
really cool transaction. He was just kind of getting started and we really clicked. One of the things DeWalker had said to me at that time was, Sarah, I really appreciate the way you and your team, these are my words, not his, speak English to clients, right? I mean,
Yes.
the legalese is a language and it's not even really English. There's a lot of Latin involved, right? And so when you can take complicated legal concepts and explain them to clients in a way that they can understand, there is such a level of appreciation that comes from that, especially entrepreneurs who really want to understand everything that's happening. And so we really just clicked. And from that time until now, we've had the opportunity to share a large number of clients, do some really interesting, very exciting, very cool work for dentists as they're starting their practices, building their practices, scaling their practices, building DSOs, and exiting their practices.
Well, it sounds like you've got a vast array of experience, and I love hearing your story because coming from that family business really does give you a completely different perspective, but it's a perspective that is very similar to that of our listeners. They're
Yeah.
building a business that directly impacts their family, the day to day of
Yes.
their family. So I love that that's relatable. I also love that you speak in simple terms because I think that it's natural for all of us in our profession, no matter what that profession is, to really speak quickly. We talk over people's heads and we forget sometimes that everyone around us doesn't necessarily understand the endless acronyms. And there's a new one every day. And I'm like, can we speak
Right.
English to our listeners and
Let's just
clients,
say the word,
please?
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's okay to spell it out sometimes.
Well, and here's the thing. My perspective really changed as a lawyer when I started my own practice. Because in that moment, I became, just like a lot of your listeners, an entrepreneur and a business owner. And so many really cool things happened in that moment. One of them was I got to reach out to my clients and say things like, how do you want to receive legal services? Like, what hasn't been working with either your previous counsel or the paradigm that I've had to operate in up until this point. And the feedback that I got from them led us to start building out fixed fees. So we do a lot of work, not all work, but a lot of work at Stock Legal for a fixed fee. That includes some of our mergers and acquisitions work, which is really exciting for our clients. But the other thing that happened was that I started to appreciate in a way that I just don't think I could have prior to this what it means to be a business owner seeking professional advice. Because, I still need help from my CPA and my financial advisor. And as a business owner, I need that in a certain way, or I want to receive or pay for things in a certain way. And all of that really, I think, gives me a unique perspective when working with entrepreneurs because I'm literally going through their journey, right? Building and scaling a business myself, I mean, from 1 to 16 lawyers in 11 years is the definition of building and scaling a law firm. So it's been a really interesting, cool, exciting experience to get to be even more empathetic to the plight of some of our clients.
Well, and I feel fortunate that you're here sharing that with us today. But I have to tell you, Sarah, in my years as a paralegal, not once did I ever hear someone, an attorney, ask a client, how do you want to receive legal services? It just blew my mind when you said that. I'm like, what? What did she just say? I love that because, there
Yeah,
is a
thank you.
comfort as a client knowing that someone's going to come in and hey, we're going to fix that. Here's what we're going to do. But I feel like you asked a really foundational question first that put me in the driver's seat of how I want things to
Yes,
go.
yes, yes. I love that feedback. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's so important. And, I think another side effect of also me being a business owner, there are so many times where I need that as a business owner and
Yeah.
I want to be able to give that to our clients. So, thank you for sharing that.
Well, why don't we get into those four areas that we talked about?
Yeah.
So, for our listeners, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that we were going to go into the four areas where Sarah and her team see dentist owners ask the most questions. And Sarah and I talked about this in advance. So, I've got a little list here, but why don't we start with the first one, Sarah, which was A.
Yeah. So, Jamie, the goal in trying to think through the topics for this podcast, and I've given presentations on this in the past as well, is the goal was and continues to be, you know, how do I share with your listeners the questions that I get most regularly, right? And, when a potential client reaches out, I do a complimentary 30-minute Zoom. I've tried to put into a container all of the things that I say to them on these potential new client 30-minute calls or Zooms, because this is the information that you need, right? Legal can be such a gating item for starting a business, growing a business, scaling a business. Let's
Yes.
try to get as much information out so you make really informed business decisions. So, M&A is such a fun topic for me because it is in so many ways sell side the culmination of a journey in scaling your business, or buy side it is so exciting because you are now at a point where your business is foundationally sound and you want to continue to grow by acquisition. And so, some of the things that we talk about, be it buy side or sell side, are deal structure. Who's your team? Do you have the right team members? Because I think that's incredibly important, to surround yourself with a really strong team. We talk
Absolutely.
about valuation, right? Valuation on sell side, go in armed with the knowledge of what the valuation of your practice is. Buy side, go in with a paradigm that you're going to value all of these potential acquisitions. And then, understanding deal structure, especially sell side, is so important But also buy side, if you're embarking for the first time on growing by acquisition, part of your journey is understanding the stages of any transaction. And I could get really dorky and talk about representations and warranties and covenants, and that I don't think that's what your listeners want to hear. But I do think that, there's a lot that you can do upfront from an M&A process perspective, be it buy side or sell side, to best prepare you to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that we hear a lot at Polaris is who can I work with? Where do I start? And then they come with all of these questions that you mentioned there as well. So I'm glad that we have you to lean on.
Absolutely. And Stock Legal has a team of 5 lawyers that do M&A work. And so, it's a well-rounded group, variable billable rates so that we make sure we efficiently and effectively staff all of our transactions. And, because it's not just me, there's incredible capacity on the team to run multiple transactions simultaneously. In fact, we're already doing that right now here in Q3. I am so excited to see what Q4 looks like.
I
We're
am too.
busy, and I love to see everything popping so early.
I know. I love that things have picked up and from all perspectives, I'm excited for even Q4 here. So
Yeah.
best is yet to come. We've
Yep.
got another quarter and a half yet. So
Yes. Yes.
all right. So the next piece of our list that dentists and owners ask you about most is real estate. Can you tell me a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yeah. Well, there always seems to come a time in the trajectory of a practice or a group practice or building out a DSO where there's excess net cash flow. And, we have an owner or owner group that's looking to try to figure out what to do with it. And, there are 100 market condition issues or opportunities that I'm not going to go into to decide if real estate is a good deal or not a good deal. But the thing that I really focus in on with our clients is there's a risk mitigation strategy here that's really very simple. And it is widely discussed, but surprisingly, we still have clients that come to us that haven't been told or don't understand or didn't proceed this way. And the very simple risk mitigation strategy is when you're buying real estate that your practice or a practice will operate in, you've got to put that real estate in a separate entity. And
Mhm.
that separate entity has to truly be separate. It needs its own bank account, it's got a contract in its own name. You should run, in some way, shape, or form, a set of financials for it, track expenses for it. And the entity that owns the real estate and the practice entity that's operating on that real estate need to have an actual lease, a legally binding agreement whereby the practice pays rent to the entity that owns the real estate. Everybody is insured. It has to truly be an arm's length transaction. And so, not so often, but often enough, we see the entity that owns the practice also own the real estate. And, when you do that, you put all of these assets into one entity that can be sued for multiple reasons. And so it's a really simple, easy step when you're looking or thinking about buying real estate to structure the transaction that way.
Well, sure. And I think, like you just mentioned, mitigating that risk by taking a very, very simple step. People just, like you said, they don't realize the risk that they're putting themselves in by having it all under one umbrella.
Yes. And when the practice entity buys the real estate and a client comes to us with that structure and there's debt on the real estate, most I can never say all, but most loan documents have a provision in it called a due on sale clause that says if you transfer the property out of the existing owner's name, it can trigger a default or it does trigger a default under the loan documents.
Mm.
And so, once you put debt on it, getting it out of that entity that also owns the practice is a little tricky. And so, doing it up front, thinking about it up front, thinking about corporate structure up front in all ways is really a very important step. But especially with real estate, we want it to be done right from the beginning.
Yeah, more things you don't want to unwind unless you have to,
Yes.
right? All right. So, number three on our list of things that you get asked about a lot and something that we obviously work on a lot is incentive equity.
Yes, yes, yes. And we love incentive equity. Polaris loves incentive equity. Incentive equity is this amazing tool that allows you to really align interests with your key associate dentist or key employees if you have a DSO. It allows people to be compensated for the success of the business or businesses in a way that you as an owner are also compensated, often on a smaller scale, often with non-voting opportunities, but it allows you to really share the success of what you're building with the people who are also contributing to that. And there are so many ways that you can do that. You can do that with profits interest. You can do it with restricted stock. You can do it with restricted stock options. You can do it with stock options. I mean, there's an endless list that is in some ways dictated by entity structure and tax elections on
Mhm.
how you can utilize incentive equity, but most, if not all of them, allow some version of milestone vesting. And all that really means is that you take a period of time or a set of actions and or both, and you outline those in your plan or in your award agreement, and that allows the steps that you as the owner believe are necessary for success to be hit, and when they're hit, the people hitting them get rewarded with equity. And that's just a beautiful way to really align interests. And then of course there's some really important protections that go into that. As an owner, you want to see that if that person is terminated or leaves the business or or for whatever reason is no longer working with the business, that there's an opportunity to buy back that equity in some way, shape, or form so that you don't end up with, people who are no longer actively participating in the business having an ownership interest. All things that can be accomplished when you're building out a really strong incentive equity plan.
Yeah, these are all things that you really have to be thinking about when you offer that to your associates. In fact, our associate equity executive, Mark Flock, speaks on this frequently at
Yes.
conferences and things, and we're glad to have you working alongside us to support our clients as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mark does a great job explaining, giving options, building out. And, I talk about Polaris a lot with our clients because I think the critical piece to building out a successful incentive equity plan is having a really clear set of financial projections for
Mhm.
what it is going to look like as the practice group practices DSO scales. Because when you're presenting incentive equity to a recipient and you just say you're going to get, 10 shares of incentive equity, that's completely meaningless unless you tell them financially what that means for them. Yay, I'm an
Exactly.
owner. You've just complicated my tax life. I have to get paid differently. What's in it for me, right? I mean, that
Exactly.
is key. So working with someone like Mark is incredibly important, and really being able to put words around that and communicate that to recipients.
Sure. And one thing that he stresses a lot in his presentations is really dialing that back. And before we even go to step one, getting that valuation in place. Where do you stand
Yes.
today before you offer even the most minuscule percentage of
Yes.
equity?
Yes.
You cannot give away a piece of a pie when you don't know the value of the pie.
Yep. 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 That's it. That's
Today's
exactly
value of
it.
the pie, I should say.
Yep. I
Absolutely.
agree. So
All right. So
important.
the last piece on our list was DSO. I'm sure we're excited to talk about this
Yes.
piece, this hot topic. So I'll let
Yes.
you take it away.
It's so interesting. Jamie, I don't know about you, and I would be really interested to hear what Mark or DeWalker or the rest of your team has to say. But I have had people utter the phrase to me, DSO is a dirty word, more
Ah,
times this year than ever before.
yes.
And here's what it's followed with, and this is always so much fun. Okay, I don't want to build a DSO. DSO is a dirty word, but here's what I want to build. And then they describe something that looks almost exactly like a DSO. But here's the thing, right? And I talk about this a lot. There is incredible efficiency in consolidating back office services inside an entity. when you have multiple practices, right? And so, if you can take out all of the private equity negative connotation, this or trying to push all of the profits in a certain way, if you can take all of that out of the equation, right? And really just land on the fact that if you're building something that has multiple practices, especially in multiple states, there is an incredible efficiency that comes from putting all of your back office services into one place. And then legally, right, we have to have services agreements between that one place where all of the back office services are and the practices that it serves. And by the way, isn't it a cool idea to take that incentive equity topic that we talked about? And instead of just incentivizing at the practice level, which only incentivizes each little group or ecosystem to do
Mhm.
well, we do incentive equity at that back office company level that's servicing all of these different practices. Well, look, just like that, like everybody's rowing in the same direction, right?
Exactly.
We're trying to increase the value of the whole instead of the value of my little sphere. And that just allows people to build bigger, work harder for the whole in a way that really moves the needle. So, DSO, I don't think DSO itself is a dirty word. I think that, there's been some bad apples and there's been some tough situations. Welcome to business, right?
Exactly.
that's,
Well, yeah,
that's
that's exactly true. It's so funny that you brought that up because I recorded an episode with our fractional COO and strategic consulting executive, Bradley, yesterday. And he
yeah.
brought up the fact that there are still some people out there that see DSO as a dirty word. And I said, I went off on a little soapbox, admittedly. It happens,
Love
not
it.
very often on this podcast, but I did.
Yeah.
From watching the progression of dentistry, and I framed it this way over the course of 20 plus years in clinical, and I no longer practice clinically as a hygienist, but I have some perspective.
Yeah.
And all I'll say is we're hung up on another acronym. And we don't need to be. Dental support organization, not service, support.
Support.
It's meant to support. It's meant to take that burden off the shoulders of the
Yeah.
practitioner so that they can do what they do best,
Yeah.
care for patients. So at the end of the day, for me, my perspective, not a dirty word, it's about
Yeah.
patient care. So I really hope at some point people can drop that whole, "Oh, I don't want a DSO. Why does it matter what we call it?
I know.
It just, why are we so hung up on that?"
Yes. Right here, Jamie. Good
There,
job. Way to,
two
way to be up on your
episodes in a
soapbox.
row.
Yes.
We'll get
Well,
there,
again,
Sarah. We'll get there.
we will get there for sure, for sure. And it's really interesting because there are two times that as a lawyer we typically get involved with people building out DSOs. One is when we have an entrepreneur that is casting a really big vision, right? May or
Mhm.
may not even be a dentist to start, but they're casting a really big vision about what they believe they can build or scale. And they're pursuing the capital to do that, right?
Yes.
When that happens, we're coming in on the front end and we are actually building out the infrastructure for a DSO before maybe even a practice exists. And so that's one way. Another way is when we have a really awesome entrepreneurial dentist. We see some of our dental clients actually getting their MBA while they're working with us or in business
Ah,
school, trying to learn a little bit more, which I think is fun and fascinating and so smart, right? Increase your business acumen if you're really leaning into the business side of what you're building. So they've got maybe two, three, four, five practices. They're looking to continue to grow, possibly by acquisition, possibly in multiple states. And they feel like they're at the tipping point where a DSO just makes more sense for all of the reasons we already talked about. So, those are really exciting times to work with an entrepreneur as they're, either casting their initial vision or they're taking what they've built and then trying to dream even bigger and going all the way back to where we started. A great time to build the foundation the right way in the beginning or as you're taking that next really big step so that we don't create that rat's nest of legal issues.
exactly. And I like that they can come and talk to you and work with you and your team on all four of those elements we talked about today. There, you can't separate one from the other, generally
Yes,
speaking. So
yes,
it's
yes. Yes.
We talked about them all together.
And, I would be doing a disservice to the firm if I didn't also say, that's not the only thing that we do at Stock
Of
Legal.
course not.
The way that I built the firm was to provide all of the legal services that an entrepreneur needs on a regular basis. So we help people form companies, we help them raise capital. If it's a contract, we draft it or negotiate it. We talked about we do commercial real estate as well. We do intellectual property, banking, estate planning, and a little bit of commercial litigation. The vast majority of what we do at Stock Legal is we can do that throughout the United States. Obviously, there are some things that are very state specific, like estate planning or litigation. But
Sure.
even in those situations, we built an amazing network of phenomenal lawyers that we know and trust. And for some of our clients, we run all of that through one invoice for them. So they get that big firm feel with a firm that only has 16 lawyers and still communicates really clearly, and you still get access to the managing partner and founder.
I would remove the word only there, Sarah. 16 lawyers on staff. It's impressive what you've built. And I'll
Oh,
say on
thank
behalf of Polaris, we're so grateful for the work that you do with our clients and
you.
clients that are even not ours, because I can see from that experience and knowing about you in the industry that do very impactful work. And
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
super grateful to have the relationship with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We genuinely love what we do and always love working with Polaris and its amazing clients.
Well, Sarah, thanks so much for sharing your story with us today and your expertise and going over those most asked questions with our audience today. I know there's so much more to learn, and certainly talking with your team about legal matters is the best next step for our listeners
Yeah.
if they have questions. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah. Email is probably best. And I am Sarah, Sara dot stock, STOCK at stocklegal, STOCKLEGAL.com.
You've had to spell that a couple of times, haven't you?
Only once or twice.
It's like me rattling off info at polarishealthcarepartners.com 14 times. Yeah, the longest email addresses, but I'll link that in the show notes so our audience can easily find you and get in touch. But as always, if you would like to learn about any of our Polaris services or reach out to Sarah, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about or you'd like to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. There's that long URL. Well, thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and then leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.